Ever wonder how those organizations doing really impactful work, actually get the funding to make that impact? We're diving into the world of program funding managers today, the folks who make those big funding dreams a reality.
And it's really a lot more than just like securing a check, right? It's about creating a whole funding strategy. It's like a roadmap.
Yeah, totally. And we've got some good intel for this deep dive. Someone sent over some resources from RoleCatcher. They've got this whole detailed career guide for program funding managers, plus some really interesting stuff about their interview prep resources and how their platform can give job seekers an edge.
Yeah, it's definitely a competitive field out there. But before we get ahead of ourselves, let's break down the basics. What exactly does a program funding manager do?
Yeah, good point. So paint us a picture. What's a typical day look like for someone in this role?
Okay, so picture this. You're developing and then actually implementing a whole funding strategy for an organization that you really truly care about. So you could be researching potential donors, you might be writing grant proposals, meeting with stakeholders, you might even be at fundraising galas. It's a dynamic role, to say the least.
Definitely not a desk job.
Yeah.
The RoleCatcher Career Guide actually mentions something about securing major funding from diverse sources. And I have to say, that sounds pretty high stakes.
Oh, absolutely. It's not just about asking for money. You're building relationships, you're figuring out the needs of donors, and then you have to craft these really compelling proposals that show the impact of the organization's work and ultimately their mission. So yeah, it takes a balance of, well, financial smarts, relationship management, and of course, a real passion for the causes you're supporting.
Speaking of the work environment, it seems like it could be pretty varied, right? Like you're in the office sometimes, but then you're also out there meeting with these donors.
Yeah, you've got it. Program funding managers are in all sorts of settings, boardrooms, fundraising events, and actually with online platforms and social media, the digital side of things is becoming more and more important in this field.
That makes a lot of sense. You got to be where the donors are. Though the career guide did mention some of the challenging parts of the job, like the potential for stress, especially when the economy is uncertain.
Right? It's not all, glitz and glam. Like any role with this level of responsibility, especially when you're talking about something as vital as securing funding, there will be pressure. But for people who thrive in that environment, they're energized by that challenge of making a difference. And for them, it can be incredibly rewarding.
So it sounds like you need a certain personality type to really excel in this role. Let's talk about the pros and cons. What does the career guide say about the potential perks and pitfalls of this career path?
They lay out both sides really well. So, starting with the positives, there's definitely potential to earn a good living, especially as you gain experience.
Okay, that got my attention. But there's got to be more to it than just a paycheck.
Of course. The guide really emphasizes the sense of purpose you get from knowing your work is contributing to something meaningful. You're not just crunching numbers, you're actually helping to support organizations that are making a real difference.
Okay, yeah, that's powerful. But what about the flip side? What are some of the downsides that potential program funding managers should be aware of?
Well, it's a really competitive field. You're often competing for limited resources. There are always more good causes than there are funds available, unfortunately. So you need to be comfortable with rejection and be able to bounce back from setbacks.
So resilience is key. Got it. Anything else?
The career guide also mentioned the demanding workload and the possibility of some long hours, especially when you're approaching deadlines or if fundraising targets aren't being met.
So definitely not your typical 9 to 5. But for the right person, someone who's passionate about the work and really wants to make a difference, it sounds like it could be incredibly rewarding. But where do you even begin? What does the career path actually look like for a program funding manager?
The RoleCatcher Career Guide does a really good job of breaking down a typical career progression. Usually, you'd start with an entry-level position, maybe like a program funding assistant, where you'd get that essential experience and learn from people who've been doing it for a while.
It's all about getting your foot in the door and then learning the ropes. What comes after that?
As you get more experience, you might move up to a program funding coordinator role. You'd have more responsibility there, like managing grant applications, building those relationships with donors, and managing budgets. You're taking on a bigger part of the process.
Okay, so you're climbing the ladder, gaining more responsibility and natural progression.
Exactly. And if you keep excelling and show your expertise, you could become a senior program funding officer. In that position, you're leading the funding strategies. You might be mentoring junior staff and building relationships with those really crucial major donors.
So at that point, you're basically calling the shots. What's the ultimate goal for someone in this line of work?
Well, the top of the ladder would be becoming a program funding manager, where you're overseeing the whole funding operation. You'd be leading a team, making strategic decisions that are really shaping the future of the organization. It requires a really deep understanding of the whole funding landscape, exceptional leadership skills, and of course, that genuine passion for creating positive change.
It sounds like a big job, but with the potential to make a real difference.
Exactly.
So we've talked about the career path, but how do you actually get started in this field? What does the RoleCatcher guide recommend for someone who's eager to dive into the world of program funding?
They're big on practical experience. Volunteering, internships at nonprofits, even taking on leadership roles in, say, community organizations. It all adds up.
It's all about getting your hands dirty, right?
Exactly. And those experiences give you a real-world sense of how fundraising and program management work, which is so valuable in this field.
Makes sense. But this is a competitive field. So what can you do to stand out to potential employers?
On top of hands-on experience, the guide talks a lot about strategic career advancement.
Hmm.
So, always going above and beyond in your current role, that's a given. But it also encourages actively seeking out growth opportunities. Volunteer for those new projects, aim for leadership roles, and never stop learning, right?
Yeah.
This field is always changing, so you have to be committed to continuous learning.
Be a go-getter. I like it. The guide also mentioned something about specializations within the field. What are some examples of those?
Oh, for sure. You can really carve out a niche for yourself by becoming an expert in a specific type of fundraising. So think major gifts, planned giving, corporate sponsorships, foundations. Those are just a few examples.
You become the go-to person for that type of funding.
Yeah.
Smart. And of course, networking is huge in any field, but especially in this one where building relationships is so important.
Couldn't agree more. The guide stresses attending industry events, conferences, workshops, all that. It's a chance to connect with other fundraising professionals, stay updated on new trends, and even hear about job openings. You never know what opportunities might come from just putting yourself out there.
It's all about making those connections and staying informed. Now, I'm curious about these certifications the guide mentioned. Are there any that really stand out in the program funding world?
One that consistently comes up is the Certified Fundraising Executive Credential, or CFRE. It's globally recognized and basically shows you're committed to ethical, effective fundraising. It's a way to prove to potential employers that you've got the skills, the knowledge, and the ethical foundation to really excel in this role.
It's like a stamp of approval.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, shifting gears a bit, what about RoleCatcher's interview prep resources? What stood out to you?
They have this awesome collection of practice interview questions, over 120,000 of them, covering a huge range of careers and industries.
Wow, that's a lot of questions.
Right. But here's the key. They're not just generic questions. They're tailored to specific roles and industries. So you can practice answering questions that are actually relevant to program funding manager positions.
No more being caught off guard by those curveball questions. What else impressed you about their resources?
Well, they have this really cool video practice feature. You can record yourself answering interview questions, then watch it back and see how you did.
That's great. It's like a mock interview, but in a more low-pressure environment. So this RoleCatcher platform sounds like it could be really helpful for anyone who's job hunting.
It definitely gives job seekers a leg up, especially in a field as competitive as program funding. But going back to the career guide for a sec, it mentioned how the whole fundraising landscape is always evolving. What are your thoughts on that?
It makes sense, right?
Mm-hmm.
The world's changing so fast, the way organizations get funding has to adapt too.
Exactly. One of the biggest trends is this focus on diversifying funding sources. Relying only on government grants or those big one-time donations isn't enough anymore. Program funding managers have to be more creative, more strategic in their approach.
Don't put all your eggs in one basket.
Exactly. They're looking into things like crowdfunding, social impact bonds, even venture philanthropy, all these new ways of getting the resources they need to make a difference.
Venture philanthropy sounds interesting. What exactly is that? It's like philanthropy, but with a business angle.
Yeah, exactly. As basically it's philanthropists investing in organizations, but they're looking for both a social and financial return. They want to support innovative solutions to social problems and are willing to take calculated risks to see a real impact.
So they're not just writing a check. They're really invested in helping these organizations grow.
Hmm.
It's interesting to see how the lines between the business world and the philanthropy world are kind of blurring. all with the goal of making a positive change.
For sure. And it just shows how adaptable program funding managers need to be. They've got to be comfortable in this environment where traditional funding models are being challenged and all these new innovative approaches are popping up.
It sounds like this role requires a unique skill set. You need to understand the social impact world and the financial world.
Absolutely. You have to be able to speak both languages and build bridges between them.
Speaking of building bridges, the guide also mentioned how important storytelling is becoming in fundraising these days.
Oh, yeah, for sure. In a world that's just overflowing with information, stories cut through all the noise and really stick with people.
It's that emotional connection. You're helping donors understand the why behind the work.
Exactly. You're putting a human face on the issues and showing how their donations are actually making a difference in real people's lives.
So it's more than just presenting the facts and figures. It's about weaving them into a story that resonates with the donor.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's talk about a key part of fundraising, the interview. I know you have a story about an interview that didn't go so well. Mind sharing.
Oh, you mean the one where I totally blanked on a question about, let's just say it wasn't my best moment? It was for a research grant, and I had prepped so much, but then they threw a curveball at me and I froze.
It happens to everyone. And that's why resources like RoleCatcher can be so helpful. Knowing that you've practiced answering a bunch of different questions can really boost your confidence and help you stay calm under pressure.
Oh, absolutely. That massive collection of practice questions, especially the ones tailored for program funding manager roles, is a lifesaver. It's like having a secret weapon going into an interview.
Yeah, having that bank of questions must be a game changer. You'd walk into the interview feeling so much more prepared.
For sure. And their video practice is great for like working on how you're coming across your body language. But even with all the prep in the world, it comes down to finding that role, that organization that really aligns with, what you care about.
That's so true. We've talked a lot about the skills and the strategies, but what about the bigger picture? What kind of person really thrives in this line of work?
The RoleCatcher guide touches on that, saying that the really successful program funding managers, they're driven by this desire to make a difference. They're passionate about the causes and willing to go that extra mile to get the resources to make an impact.
It's more than a job then. It's like a calling.
Exactly. You're not just fundraising, you're championing a cause, you're advocating for change, you're part of building something better.
That really resonates. You need that drive, that belief in the power of the work you're doing. But passion alone isn't enough, is it? You also need to be adaptable, resilient, especially with how much fundraising is changing.
Oh, absolutely. And the guide really emphasizes ethical and transparent fundraising practices. Especially now, donors are more and more discerning. They want accountability.
Transparency, accountability, that's how you build trust with donors. And it's crucial for organizations to be sustainable long term.
Exactly. And with social media, online platforms, it's so easy for donors to, really see what an organization's doing, hold them accountable.
It's a whole new world for fundraising. Transparency and authenticity are non-negotiable. Before we wrap up, I want to circle back to something you mentioned earlier, how collaboration is becoming so important in fundraising.
Right. We're seeing way more cross-sector partnerships. So businesses, nonprofits, even government agencies are all coming together to work on these big, complex social issues.
Breaking down those silos, we can achieve so much more.
100%. By combining resources, sharing what they know, playing to their strengths, these partnerships, they can make a way bigger impact than any one group could on its own.
It's powerful, right? Collaboration is key. This has been such an insightful deep dive. I mean, we've covered so much, from what a program funding manager actually does day to day, to the future of philanthropy, to how important ethical and innovative fundraising is becoming.
We've only just scratched the surface, but hopefully this gives you a good idea of what this career path is all about, the challenges, the rewards, and the potential to really make a difference.
Absolutely. And the biggest takeaway, if you're passionate about making a difference, if you thrive in a fast-paced environment that's constantly changing, and you're ready to embrace innovation and collaboration, then program funding might be the perfect fit for you.
I think so. And with resources like RoleCatcher, you can get the tools, the knowledge, the connections you need to have a really successful, fulfilling career in this field.
Couldn't have said it better myself. So, for anyone out there considering this path, keep learning, keep exploring, and most importantly, keep that passion for positive change alive. Until next time, keep diving deep.